This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Kylie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Live and direct. The final few games of regular season basketball. The NBA is clearly all eyes on the Eastern Conference, the bottom half of the bracket, man. It's so good. It's so tantalizing. It's so NBA. A lot of good stuff happening, man, and it's going to come down to the wire to figure out which teams are getting in. And we got a lot of stuff to cover, so I'm really excited about this week's show. Let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, 50 grand, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. You got your binoculars on as you are watching the NBA close up and personal down the wire.
I think I'm like everybody else, homie. Real talk. Like we're digged in. Like we have our hands, our feet, everything in the sand, just looking at how this NBA season is going to shake out here in the final 3 to 4 days. Western Conference player, I mean, the teams have been decided, but not the seeding as well. So some movement that could happen there. But I really am excited about what's happening in the Eastern Conference. Also living in the South Florida area, seeing if Dwayne Wade gets to do his last dance situation in the playoffs one last time. The Hornets get in, the Pistons, the Nets, Orlando. I mean, I think it's just a great time. But as always, salute to all the fans and listeners of NBA Baseline. We're going to be diving into a lot of great content, as always, my dude, and I'm going to let you lead us right in, bro.
Yeah, man, listen, big show, obviously. You know, we're going to tap into giving our just dues as far as regular season awards go. So that'll be the main topic of conversation. But before we do that, Shaw, you know, we've been spending a few moments, you know, before we even jumped on this podcast, kind of really focusing in on what is happening with the playoff picture in the Eastern Conference. And we had a show a couple weeks ago where we felt like this was going to come down to that final 8 seed and who from the Sunshine State, the Suns, excuse me, I can't even get it out right, the Sunshine State, who from the Orlando Magic or the Miami Heat, who would be taking that spot. And, you know, we both had said, you know, through our convictions of consciousness, I've said, we think the Heat is going to do it because, look, you got D Wade. D Wade wants to ride off in the sunset on a high note. And even if it's not to get to an NBA Finals, I think the ability for him to elevate this type of ball club to be participating in this year's playoffs, I think, again, will kind of tap on, you know, another part of why we call that Wade's world, you know what I'm saying? Wade County down there, why he owns that. And then now we're looking at this situation, man, and the Orlando Magic, the Charlotte Hornets, the Detroit Pistons, all of these teams have not separated themselves properly and have allowed, actually, you know, to the point, the Charlotte Hornets to be still in this conversation about making the playoffs. And it's just absolutely crazy that we're at this point again, and it's only been 2 weeks removed.
I want to give a shout to you, my dude, simply because I think if anyone's been listening to our show over the last couple of weeks, as you alluded to, we kind of courtesy mentioned the Hornets, if you will. You know, and I think even signing off on that show, you know, remember you said, hey, Kemba, if you want to throw a wrench in these plans and, you know, screw up the plans of Orlando or Miami, go ahead and be welcome to do so. And, well, the Hornets, they've done just that. They've changed their starting lineup. Like Nicholas Batum, like, doesn't even really play anymore. They're relying on guys like Dwayne Bacon and obviously Kemba. Kaminsky's found his way back into the lineup somehow, some way. And the Hornets team is here scratching and clawing for an opportunity to get into this situation. And the Miami Heat, they had not the easiest stretch, and they just also didn't perform. I think the biggest loss, was to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Dwayne Wade missed a 3-point shot at the buzzer. In a game that probably shouldn't have been as close as it was, but Minnesota, credit to them for wanting to play spoilers. So right now we have a situation where nobody's comfortable. You know what I mean? Nobody's clinched, and now everyone is trying to get their way in there. And Charlotte really has made a mess of things in a good way. So I'm happy to see that Kemba did not give up, and you know Borrego and those guys have really kind of gotten it together now to give us some exciting basketball here in the final week.
Well, let me also say this too, Shaw. I'm really surprised that the Detroit Pistons have not closed the deal. Okay. And I think, you know, we're not going to get into doing our autopsy reports just yet. right? Like there's still a couple of games that have left to be played. But like even as we're recording this podcast, the Detroit Pistons had an opportunity on their home court to close out the Charlotte Hornets, to seal the deal for them to be participating in the playoffs. And now this may actually come down to the final game of the season of whether or not they're in, right? And I'm a little surprised that a former coach of the year in Dwayne Casey did not get his troops prepared to do what was necessary to solidify their positioning to be in the Eastern Conference playoffs at this point. While this is a basketball team that really heated up, kind of latter part of the first half, most of the second half of the season, these last few weeks they have scuffled. And in a crucial game that would have allowed them to be able to walk away from this saying the Detroit Pistons are a lock to be participating in this year's playoffs, you basically go in and you allow the Charlotte Hornets to break off 13 in your behind on your home court. That to me says a lot of things about the dynamic of this basketball team. And if the Detroit Pistons don't make it into the playoffs, Shaw, I would love for us to put them on the slab for the autopsy report first and foremost, because I think I will have some things to say about what needs to happen to this team moving forward. If there's any expectation that you're going to utilize a guy like Dwayne Casey, who's obviously a great coach, but to put around the proper roster that he's going to need to kind of right this kind of wrong, because there's nothing more disappointing than knowing that they had an opportunity to walk into this playoff situation and they stunk up the joint. And not only allowing the Charlotte Hornets to still be in the conversation, but they may actually, that game that happened this weekend, Shaw, could actually be the death knell to why the Pistons don't get into playoffs.
Well, and I think you have great and valid points. I think with Detroit, there is some anti-venom, to your poison that you're giving to them. I think Blake Griffin isn't 100% healthy. So they are dealing with that. And there really is nobody to kind of carry the offensive load on that team outside of him. He has to facilitate for them. He has to score for them. And I know, yes, Andre Drummond is there, but Drummond is not creating his own shot. And he's basically cleaning up stuff, maybe sometimes off pick and roll, but not even really. A lot of times just off the offensive rebounds and putbacks and lobs and things of that nature. So Detroit, I think, is in a bad way when it comes to their ability to score right now, especially with Blake hobbled by whatever is really going on there. And he's not right. You can see it kind of when he's out there for sure. But the other guys just haven't been able to step up too. And you can put that on KC some, for some of that. But this is a team that's built and needs to to work around Blake. So your point to like, what do they do moving forward? So that's maybe not the case moving after this season. How can they get some other players into this situation now? And that might mean breaking it up and Andre Drummond, things of that nature. But we'll have to wait and see when it comes to that. But Detroit, I think, is a team that hasn't truly had an up and down season. I had forgotten all about them, right before All-Star break. I was just like, all right, well, whatever. That team is done. And then they went on a miraculous run. And to be very honest, you talk about putting on the autopsy report. I thought about making them a breakdown topic at some point because they were playing so well, but something about them I just didn't trust.
They broke down all right. 3 of the last 10, they broke down on the side of the road trying to hitchhike their way back into the playoffs. So
So it's funny because we didn't.
But what is up with these Central Division teams, Shaw? Over the last few years, man, it's something I can't quite explain it. But the Indiana Pacers, the Milwaukee Bucks, and now the Detroit Pistons. There's something about these Central Division teams on the back end of the regular season when they have an opportunity to control their own destiny. They seem to kind of, backslide their way into the playoffs. They look like a team that we can have these kind of breakdown conversations about how legitimate and how much of a threat they're going to be. And then the next thing you find out is, these guys that go on these horrendous losing streaks, the offense out of sync, the defense is misplaced. And then you keep saying to yourself that, they made it into the playoffs, but you have no confidence that they're going to get out of the first round.
Well, I think that's something that we'd have to continue to get the historical data on and analyze it. But I think it's an interesting point. With the divisions specifically, and they all have their various caveats that have put them in those positions currently right now. But I think you can't knock the Pistons if they're just not healthy. And you can knock the fact that they don't have the requisite roster to withstand an injury. But the fact that they aren't healthy and their best player isn't that's a big issue. And they don't have enough guns in the tank or bullets in the chamber, rather, to be able to withstand a significant Blake injury where he's not going out there and being able to produce at an MVP level for them. I'm not saying he's an MVP, but an MVP level for them. He needs to be their best player at all times. So Dwayne Casey's got some thinking and some figuring out to do. I know that front office has been through some flux as well, obviously in recent years, but we'll see what ends up happening at the course of this regular season because I think it's going to be a dandy between Detroit, Brooklyn, Orlando, and even the Charlotte Hornets. And I guess now we'll throw the Miami Heat in there. Although right now, as we discussed this, they're 10th when it comes to the seeding in the Eastern Conference.
Ooh, boy, I tell you, it's all good, baby. Isn't this a nice way for us to end off the Baseline NBA podcast? Last episode of the regular season, right? This is just a good way to kind of creep us very quietly with Sasquatch feet and getting ourselves ready for these playoff previews, man. I'm telling you, the noise can't be too quiet now. We're talking about the final couple of playoff seeds here in the Eastern Conference. So once again, we appreciate you and yours for tuning in with us here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw. Be sure to get my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at GameFace Lee, the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. We're available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. We're always around. We're always trying to give you the butter goods, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Shout outs to our peoples from Dash Radio. Catch us on Tuesday mornings, 9 a.m. To get you prepped up for the NBA season. Also, just as a footnote, definitely keep tuned, keep us locked. You know it's that time for us, the Baseline NBA podcast, as we give you our coveted playoff previews, as we've been kind of touting out, rolling out very slowly, you know what I'm saying, leaking a little bit about how we going to throw it down, man. Get ready, man. We're going to get you all set up, get your mind right, give you all the analytics, give you the numbers, give you the info to get you prepared for this upcoming NBA playoff season. So without further ado, let's get right into it. You know how we roll. You know how we do. Let's talk regular season awards here on The Breakdown. Time now for The Breakdown. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast. And this week on The Breakdown, we are going to talk NBA regular season awards around that time frame, right? You know, listen, we know the NBA is going to have their award show, the NBA Players Award Show, and it's going to be all good. You know, guys going to be dressed up, red carpet, blue carpet. If you're Russell Westbrook, plaid carpet. You know, whatever floats your boat. We know that the awards are going to be handed out, but obviously the most important awards are the ones that we think are deserving for these players. So obviously, my man Sean and I, we're going to kind of break down each of these particular categories as we've been doing during the middle part of the season and towards in the beginning of the season. And the first one that jumps out at me, Shaw, Executive of the Year. And look, man, there's quite a few different guys right now that could certainly be in the conversation for this. But I'm very curious from your perspective, Shaw, who do you think should be taking Executive of the Year?
This situation is always interesting for me, simply because the criteria, like many of the awards, isn't necessarily clearly defined. Most times, it does go to the team with the best record, so to speak, and maybe whether or not they made moves. But I think in this case, they did. And I think the Milwaukee Bucks are going to have a lot to say about the NBA awards in general here on our show, and when it comes down to the awards actually be giving out in June or July. So, with that said, I think John Horst from the Milwaukee Bucks is actually going to win the award. But I want to give shouts, obviously, to Masai in Toronto for what he's been able to do and getting Kawhi. And it's interesting because if they're able to keep him, while the awards will be decided before the regular season. But if we know at some point in the summer that Kawhi is coming back, I think it's just going to speak loud to what he's been able to do in that situation. And I also just not getting enough credit, in this mold, so to speak, is the job that Tim Conley's done in Denver. The Nuggets for a good part of the season were the number one seed, and battling Golden State, and I guess technically could still get there mathematically, but he's built a fabulous roster, allowed it to grow. And a lot of times people look at the executive and say, okay, what did you do? Who did you bring on? And sometimes it's knowing that you don't need to do anything. Even the Isaiah Thomas thing hasn't worked out for them right now. He's not even in the rotation. But understanding that this team needed the ability to kind of just grow within itself and grow together. Guys like Malik Beasley, playing a major role for them off the bench. So they have the certain level of depth. So if I was voting, I'd give it to John Horst, but I think I'd actually put Tim Conley 2 and Masai 3. And then I'd actually put maybe Lawrence Frank and Jerry West fourth from the LA Clippers.
Yeah, there's a lot of deserving individuals who I think should win the Executive of the Year award. And there's one person I want to throw in there as an honorable mention. I'm sure he'll probably be not even in the conversation, amongst the pundits who actually do evaluate and give out this award. But I like what Sean Marks has done for the Brooklyn Nets. This is a team that
Yeah, no
went
doubt.
from 28 wins, and they're going to be either a 500 or an above 500 team. So that's a 13 or 14 plus win turnaround, with an assemblance of players that were made by moves that Sean Marks is responsible for. And it's unfortunate because a lot of the things that I think we want to credit executives are based within the year itself, but there is a residual effect that happens when guys like Sean Marks make the kind of deals that he makes, getting a guy like D'Angelo Russell via through a trade, bringing a guy like Damari Carroll out of Atlanta over, getting a guy like Spencer Dinwiddie, you know what I'm saying? Like, and re-signing these guys and putting the necessary pieces so that the coach that they've hired is out there executing. So I'm just throwing that out there. While he is not going to win this, it's a shame because I do think that Sean Marks should be in that consideration. With all that being said, I don't I don't doubt 1 minute, Shaw, that Horst is going to wind up walking away with the Executive of the Year. And there's one caveat to this that I want to throw in there that I think is more becoming of the trends of what you use to evaluate this type of award. It's not so much the moves that you make, but it's probably the moves that you don't make that I think can also elevate you to this particular status. And so I guess in what I'm saying is that in most cases executives feel like they have to make a trade, you have to sign someone, you have to do a deal. If you look at what Horst did, he stripped this team down to the necessary components that he feels like can allow Budenholzer to function as a coach and for his players to play at an optimal level. Meaning what you're getting now from Eric Bledsoe, what you're getting now from Chris Middleton, I don't think would have been the case had they kept Jabari Parker. And this is nothing against Jabari Parker. I'm just saying that knowing that there's probably a player that you're willing to lose for the greater good of what you think you're going to see with the rest of this team, I think speaks volumes into how your executive is reading the roster and the type of coach that he's bringing on board to get these guys to play at a high level. And so to me, that is something that I think has to be looked at when you start evaluating that, because then you can also put into the mix the guys like Conley, guys like Lawrence Frank, who a lot of those guys strip down some of the roster in order to allow more opportunity for the star players to come out and really kind of set the pieces in place for us to identify what makes that team who they are. And I gotta applaud Horst for doing that. Sometimes doing less is a lot more than doing more for less.
Well, I mean, my only follow up to that is, I think he made the right moves. Obviously, Coach Bud hiring him was a massive decision for the future of this franchise, and got Milwaukee playing their best offense. He's unlocked the potential and made Giannis an MVP candidate. Made Coach Bud himself a Coach of the Year candidate for the second time in roughly was that 5-6 years now. After that stellar run he had in Atlanta when he got there as well too. So he's paid immediate dividends. Obviously the signing of Brook Lopez, getting the depth Malcolm Brogdon, who's now injured, getting George Hill, it would seem like a minor move at the time, but that's big, and it was salary saving as well too. Like as I said, we talked about this at the midway point. Milwaukee's also set up from a salary standpoint with some of the moves that they've made too. Lopez's deal is expiring, George Hill's deal is expiring, acquiring Mirotic at the deadline as well. So I think Horst, especially with the team having the best record in the NBA, he's definitely going to win this award. But as you alluded to, I think Atkinson and Sean Marks and all those guys, Lawrence Frank, everybody, they've done an amazing job, and they all deserve to be recognized one way or another. So, but I think Horst is going to go ahead and win this one.
I just thought of something, Shaw, before we move on to the next award. I just thought of something that I would love to see. And maybe we just might have to put this one, in the parking lot, right? Like just kind of put that in the idea box. I would love to see an award being given to the executives who are responsible for drafting the players that they draft. Like, a lot of the focus when we talk about executive decisions, I don't think we tend to parse out the fact that when you're evaluating talent, that's, via through the draft. But then when you're also talking about signing free agents, we try to kind of commingle a lot of this stuff. And you look at some of the guys that are currently playing right now. And in my head, I'm saying, wow, it would be really great for us to evaluate the executives that did make good moves, good decisions, drafting the type of players that are now, quote unquote, the stars for their team, that are the forefront players for their team. And, we don't have time to do that because we kind of try to, coalesce we try to speak in totality of all of the things that an executive does. I would be more so prone to want to separate that aspect of it because when you got guys like Trae Young, Luka Doncic, and maybe even over the course of the last couple of seasons, we've seen executives make quality decisions in bringing the kind of players that they want on the team, maybe at the time, but they don't develop until maybe a year or two later or a year or two beyond. And it'll just be interesting for me to see how we can have those type of conversations because I don't think we do enough of that when we talk about guys that are drafted that actually come in and are contributing to help a basketball team become successful as well too. They may not be a part of the starting lineup, but they are a part of something that has obviously elevated this team to this point.
Well, I think that's a great point, and it's interesting if we'd be able to actually measure that in some form or fashion, because a lot of times happens if the scouting team and all those other people in the front office, they report to the executive, I mean, the person who we're talking about for this potential award. But it was almost as if you're describing maybe a support award for the front office in some form or fashion to figure out who gets these guys the information to ultimately make that final decision, to say yes, this is who we're going to get, because a lot of the GMs, they don't have the time to go out there and do the scouting and do the training, if you will, and the interviewing themselves, and they have to rely on many people within an organization. And as I say, it takes a village, and that's very much true, I think, in the course of the NBA as well. So it'd be interesting to see if that ever would to come about in some form or fashion. Taking it away from the individual aspect of it, and figuring out, okay, well, how could you recognize a team for the excellence that they do, maybe as an organization.
Most definitely. You're tuned to the Baseline. Kyle Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA as we get into our NBA regular season awards. Moving on, let's talk about Coach of the Year. This is going to be an interesting one, Shaw. I don't know whether or not we'll be on the same page about this one, but who do you have predicted to walk away with the Coach of the Year award?
Well, as I said, the awards I think are going to be Milwaukee heavy, and I think Coach Bud is going to take this one as well, simply because Milwaukee has never been this good, and it's not a knock on anybody in any of the jobs that have been done out there, but I just feel like this award typically goes to the guy who usually does have the best team. And a lot of times, in that situation, it's the guy who was the best player. And Giannis was very good, obviously, before Bud got here, but he wasn't this good. I think in the totality of it, when you take into the fact that they are the number one seed and will have the number one overall seed in the NBA, and then you have a guy who's now become the MVP. You raise their defense, 10, 15 spots, to be in the top 10 now. Their offense, they're shooting threes, all of that. Coach Bud really, really kind of has this almost on lock to me. But that's not to say that Nick Nurse won't get consideration. That's not to say that Kenny Atkinson won't get consideration. We're not even talking about Steve Clifford right now in the Orlando Magic and the fact that they are about to clinch a playoff spot or have the ability to. Or what about the always forgotten Terry Stotts in Portland? And we always kind of write the Trailblazers off, but here they are fighting potentially even for a 3 seed in the Western Conference. All of these guys do amazing work, and Doc Rivers, and you can even say, although the Kings, they have a chance to finish 500, but what about Jaeger and what he's done? There's always so many great guys that you could highlight. Nate McMillan and the Pacers without Victor Oladipo specifically. I look at this and say, wow, it's a shame that when you talk about something that maybe needs an amendment, um, I feel like this is an award that probably does, because I feel like maybe you can give out one for the East and the Western Conference or something like that. I know Van Gundy and people like that, they always talk about why can't we have an Offensive Player of the Year award? Because since we have a Defensive Player of the Year award, like the NFL does, and I think maybe we should maybe be able to do some things by split by conference, because this award is tough because there's always so many great candidates, and I just listed off like 7 guys, but I do believe Coach Bud is going to be the one to take it.
Man, I completely agree with everything that you're saying, Shaw. Let me probably do my final Cowspiracy theory for the regular season. All right,
let's get it.
I think Mike Malone is going to win this one, Shaw. I think Mike Malone's going to hear me out on this. Let's remember last year the Denver Nuggets played the final game of the season to try and get in, and they lost. So they weren't even in the playoffs last year. Okay, the Milwaukee Bucks found themselves playing in the first round against the Boston Celtics. So Mike Budenholzer inherited an already good basketball team. Now, granted, with what Horst has done and the emergence of Antetokounmpo, you can make the argument this version of Antetokounmpo probably would never come to fruition unless Budenholzer steps in as the head coach. That's kind of like making the argument about when Mark Jackson got fired from the Golden State Warriors and Steve Kerr unleashed the Splash Brothers, and they became this offensive juggernaut that are now going to be in the historical annals of NBA basketball, right? But what I'm saying is that I feel like there's going to be a lot of controversy if Giannis does not win the MVP. And I think part of this is going to be if you give Giannis the MVP, right? You have to give credence to the fact that the Denver Nuggets went from a team that wasn't even in the playoffs to the number 2 seed in the Western Conference, meaning they are going to be ahead of the Houston Rockets, who last year was in the Western Conference Finals, right? They're going to be ahead of the Portland Trail Blazers. They're going to be ahead of the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Utah Jazz. They will have leapfrog 7 spots ahead of people in a year's time frame under the same head coach that figured out a way to utilize, and even to some lesser degree, I think a lot of people knew that the Denver Nuggets were going to be a good basketball team, but I don't think that they knew that it would be this good. And I think that may lead credence to Mike Malone walking away with the Coach of the Year. What do you think?
I think those are all great and valid points. I think Detroit, Denver's ascension in the Western Conference has largely gone unnoticed, simply because of maybe where they are, and even the caliber of stars that they have, and even the caliber of coach that they have. Mike Malone is kind of an under the radar type of guy. Jokic is an under the radar type of guy. Paul Millsap, who's the most boisterous personality on that team? It's probably Will Barton and Isaiah Thomas, who's not really playing right now. But this is a team that has taken a major leap. They've been, for the most part, and well, I shouldn't say that. Your point is even bolstered by the fact that they've had so many injuries and they've been able to maintain, and that's because of the great job I think Conley has done in getting a roster of guys who can plug and play. And Mike Malone has a system there where it's very much that, all right, well, Millsap goes down, no problem. Well, Barton goes down, no problem. And they're getting everybody to be able to contribute. I think Malone has a very strong case, and I don't think I mentioned him in the 7-8 guys that I listed there, and that's definitely an error on my behalf. And I'd be interested to see where he finishes. I just feel like how this league works in terms of the voting, they're like he may have to wait in line. He may have to do it again, and the Nuggets may have to be the clinch the number 1 seed in essence to kind of get that notoriety. But I think he has a very, very strong case. And probably could at least finish as high as second, I think, by the voting count. But I'd be surprised if Bud didn't walk away.
But this again, Shaw, this is to my point, thinking that this is not even about questioning whether or not you should or shouldn't automatically give it to Mike Budenholzer, because I'm not dismissing the idea that what he's accomplished, I think, is far and beyond great. And then listen, you could also lean credence to Mike Budenholzer already won Coach of the Year, right? He did that with an overachieving Atlanta Hawks team. All I'm saying is that if you want to make this more as part of my Cowspiracy theory, it's not just about the idea that because in many respects, you're going to have to give some kind of credit to the Denver Nuggets being the kind of team that they are, or is there going to be a lot of controversy about that as well, too? I think people would make a fuss about this idea, this premise, that a team worked this hard who wasn't even in the playoffs to suddenly now be in the playoffs, to be a 2 seed in still what's considered the toughest conference of the 2 conferences, right? If you are Mike Malone, it would be a travesty if there is no recognition to what this team has accomplished. And since, to your point, there are no stars. There's like no, Jokic is not going to be is going to be an MVP in MVP considerations. So Mike Malone is your dude. Mike Malone is your man. Mike Malone is your superstar. It would be hard pressed for me because of the controversy of knowing that you can get away with giving Giannis the MVP, right? Because if you give the MVP to Harden, people are probably not going to say too much because of what Harden's been doing. You give it to Budenholzer, that's all right, because you're going to say, well, we want to see Antetokounmpo do what he did this year, do it again next year, because then we're going to say he should be winning the MVP. But if you give it to Giannis, a lot of people are going to be sitting there saying, damn it, man, what about the Denver Nuggets, man? When are you going to show them cats some love? Like, what will it take?
Well, again, I don't disagree. I'm interested to see how voting will go specifically for that, because I think these are very valid points for Coach Michael Malone. And I'm a Malone guy. I do believe that, he's a very good coach and has been a very good coach in a long time. And he got a raw deal for sure last year. That year in Sacramento, he got let go. And then, did a great job in trying to get this team to a level of respectability, and wasn't an easy go, and they stayed the course. So they deserve credit for that, and he deserves credit for that too, in implementing the system that his guys can build around. Even the fact that they, kind of going back to Conley, but the fact that they had Nurkic, and then Malone said, listen, I tried to play those 2 guys together, and it just didn't work. So they had 2 great talented centers, but clearly one is better than the other. So they casted one off and kept the one that was the best one for them. And now they know how to play through him in an NBA that isn't typically used to right now going and playing through center. But Jokic is such a special talent, so Malone doesn't buck the trend, because he realizes, okay, well, he has a trend-setting center in Jokic. So a lot of great points, I think, here, and I think it just bolsters the point in general for this particular award to maybe have 2, especially if you think about it from an Eastern and a Western Conference standpoint.
Yeah, man. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA as we get into our NBA regular season awards. Just so our listeners know, man, pop bottles out there in Brooklyn. The Brooklyn Nets are playoff bound, baby. After party at the 4040 Club. I'm sure Jay Hove is getting it all set up. Quite lovely. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to be seeing a little bit more of D'Angelo Russell. Thank you, Mr. Russell. He obviously has proven that what my prediction was is I thought he was going to be a legitimate guard in the NBA. He found a home. He found a spot where, you know what I'm saying, that ice veins that he has in his system can do some good, can do some damage in the NBA, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, big win as we record our show here. Brooklyn beating the Indiana Pacers, clinching also Boston for the number 4 seed. So 4-5, Boston, Indiana locked up already. It's a done deal, and we know exactly who has home court and who doesn't. But bigger news for the Brooklyn Nets, who haven't had a pick in ages and have somehow found a way to get this done and get into the playoffs ahead of their crosstown rivals in the New York Knicks. So again, I can't imagine what's going on right now in Gotham, bro. But kudos to Spencer Dinwiddie, who we had on the show, D'Angelo Russell, Atkinson, Marks, all those guys. Man.
And let me say this, Shaw. I know I don't want to backtrack, but I have to say this. This again should be another reason why we should be talking about Sean Marks as being an executive of the year. Like I said, I know he's not going to win it, but you tell me, this is a team that has not had the number 1 draft pick because they basically auctioned the farm thanks to Billy King and the move that they made. This is a team that Sean Marks put together without a high draft pick, right? He made trades. He shed his salary. He got rid of some players. He added on some players. He took in some throwaways. And then these guys went from losers to playoff performers in like a 2-year span. And I'm telling you, man, much props to Sean Marks. Much props to the Brooklyn Nets organization, to the owner, okay? who a lot of people, like, we chastise this guy. I mean, we meme this guy to death about his ineptitude, about the fact that it's only about the money. Much props to allowing him to put basketball minds in there to fix the mess that was created. And this is the produce of this. This is the production of this. And I don't want to hear people belly aching anymore about about this whole thing about how, we need to have a high draft pick. We need to be the number 1 pick. We need to start tanking and win. This is exactly why you need pure basketball minds, people who know and are passionate about the game and know what they're doing to help do the things that are necessary, because then you get the results like what you see here with the Brooklyn Nets. I just want to get on my soapbox and speak on that, because I get tired of hearing people making these illegitimate complaints about how organizations need to do this, that, and the third, and everyone is playing armchair GM and don't really know what's going on and don't believe and buy into when you put together a good component, good players, a good roster, that they will go out there and they will perform for you. They will go out there and they will play for their coach. They will play for you, for the fans. But they have to buy into it. The fans have to buy into it. And it's not going to be an easy fix. It never is. But this is what hard work and this is what good minds do. They put together a successful season. Whether or not people want to say they overachieved, underachieved, it doesn't matter. They achieved and they're in the playoffs.
Yeah, well, I mean, you talk about bolstering a case, so to speak. As we discussed this, you're talking about a team that had 13 wins, right? Just was that last year.
Okay.
So, now jump into 41. So again, Marks and Atkinson and those guys have done an amazing job. And, I think he probably bolstered the case of both of them for their respective categories, one way or another. And I really do want to, again, we've spent a lot of time on this, but I think what Brooklyn did when Marks took over that position, understanding where they were and what position Billy King put them in, they did a lot of creative things, and they not to say they were innovators, but they started the poison pill contracts, so to speak. At least this version of it. Although people have found creative ways to kind of get around it now. At the time, it was being innovative as they were trying to drive the market up on their competitors because, well, what else were they going to do? They couldn't get draft picks, so they tried everything, and then now they've turned themselves into a more than a reputable franchise. They took advantage of the Lakers punting on D'Angelo Russell, found a way to get Spencer Dinwiddie over there and locked him up as well too. Traded off Brook Lopez. So many things has happened in a short amount of time now, and now they're reaping the benefits of that success. So again, kudos to Brooklyn. Stand up. You're finally in the playoffs, man. Time in roughly 4 or 5 seasons.
All right, y'all. Let's go ahead and switch gears, man, and let's talk about that 6th Man of the Year award. Who do you have slated to hoist that trophy?
Yeah, man. What's that? It's that Far Side song? Can't keep running away. Like, this is a runaway. Lou Williams locked this way up a long time ago, and there's nobody else really kind of even in the atmosphere right now. And it was interesting. People gave it a good run for a while. I think there was talk about Derrick Rose. Obviously, there's talk about Eric Gordon and things of that nature. Even Lou Williams' own teammate, Montrezl Harrell. But Lou Williams is that dude. There's nothing, not even a whole lot of conversation needs to be had here. He's the all-time 6th Man of the year too in terms of scoring off the bench. So I don't think there's much question about who's going to win the award this year.
Yeah, stamped, signed, sealed, delivered, approved, express rush order. You just give the man the award. Let's not even waste any time. Lou Williams is that guy, and let me also make sure that I add this caveat. Much like how we talked about how Jamal Crawford really elevated the 6th man role to the point where this was around the time that Lou Williams was coming off of that injury. And I want to make sure that we give the proper consideration and props to the Atlanta Hawks, who I think was instrumental in allowing Lou Williams to kind of find his game the second time around. And then I think you see what he has been doing with the other teams that he's played for. Remember he played for Houston for a short stint and stuff like that. Everywhere he's gone, I think he has helped define the expectations of what coaches want to see from guys who come off the bench, who are pure scorers, from guys who are going to come off and play in that 6th role. So to me, Lou Williams has again elevated the importance of what the 6th man the sixth man is supposed to be, not just for the team in general, but also as far as what they contribute um, on a real high level, And so it's hard to put into words what he's accomplished in this short stint. You won't even think about it, but he's been in the league for so long, and he has done so much. And I think this type of award this year is going to have a lot more meaning to it, simply because of the importance that he has been to the Los Angeles Clippers, having the kind of record that they have and being in the position that they're in. In previous years, when the sixth man of the year comes into play, you normally are just looking at the numbers. You don't necessarily look at the impact in itself. I think there may have been, 1 year? I think it was J.R. Smith when he was playing with the Knicks, because he was the second best scorer for the New York Knicks. But it was always about Carmelo Anthony and him needing somebody. In this case, Lou Williams has helped elevate everyone. Everyone now is in the spotlight about why the Los Angeles Clippers are in the playoffs, and I think he deserves a lot of props for that. All right, Shaw, let's go ahead and move our focus now to the Defensive Player of the Year. Who's going to be the DPOY, that D-boy for the NBA?
This is another one. Because I think a lot of it, you look at the teams with the best defense sometimes, or look at who's the best individual defender. A lot of great people and names you can throw out there. Some of the usuals, in the Kawhi Leonards, if you will, too. But I feel like he's maybe missed too many games, to maybe capture this award. I think Paul George was running away with it for a good while. High steals numbers, good all on the ball defender. One of the best in terms of deflections and even capturing loose balls, even some of those hustle stats that you may not always be paying attention to. Defensive rating wise is actually the Milwaukee Bucks as we record today. The head of that snake is Giannis. But in Utah, it can't be overstated what Rudy Gobert does for them. They're ranked second in terms of defensive rating this year. And I feel Gobert probably has the inside track, and maybe it's just overtaken Paul George because the OKC Thunder have slipped up a little bit and dropped from their lofty standing earlier in the season, where Utah has kind of risen to the occasion here in recent weeks. And not to say that the last couple of weeks have determined the award, but they very well might have. So I'm going to go with Gobert, with Paul George and Giannis, coming in probably second and third. Kawhi Leonard obviously getting some consideration as well.
Man, this is going to be a tough one, because I feel like, again, Paul George is kind of fading on the back end. First he's in these conversations for Defensive Player of the Year. He's in the conversations for MVP, and then he hits a wall. And it's not so much that the numbers just go down drastically, but it just matriculates over time. Game after game after game, to the point where you're just like, now you're not even really discussing him in that same kind of light. And I just don't understand how he fades, or why he fades in the way that he does. You look at someone like Russell Westbrook, who he plays next to. Russell Westbrook really struggled through a good portion for most of the season, 3/4 of the season, you could say. And in the last quarter of the season, not only does he elevate his numbers where he again finishes with a triple-double, but, he's that ferocious guy, like he is just now getting started. And that's exactly what you want and need if you're OKC going into the playoffs. And so I agree with you. I think Rudy Gobert is going to wind up being given the trophy. But, again, I feel like this is going to be the second year in a row that, by a default perspective, Rudy Gobert is going to wind up getting this award. It's almost as if to say, is he truly as dominant the person as he was in the beginning portions of his career as he is now, or is he just stabilized? Because I feel like there have been other people who have been more exciting, who have elevated more. Maybe the numbers are more on Rudy's side, but there have been other guys who I think have had so many chances to really separate themselves from Rudy, to taking that award, and they just have not seized that opportunity.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's a great point about Paul George as well, too. Just, I feel like I waffle on him a lot, because I'm like, he's good, but he's not something that's always missing from me. And I'm not putting the Thunder's woes on him, solely on him and his responsibility. He also was banged up a little bit towards the end of this year. But you're right. The fervor has just died down for whatever reason. It's just not the same. And that's because OKC hasn't been the same, which means he hasn't been the same. So as a result of that, I think maybe Gobert just kind of defaults into it. Um, we're already leaning toward Giannis for the MVP. They probably may not want to give him Defensive Player of the Year award as well too. Like there's this unwritten kind of society, if you will, that's going on here. It's like, all right, we want to space it out, and people have to kind of wait their turns. So I think PG did have the inside track, but they're just not really willing to do it for him right now too. And I'd love to see a guy like Embiid step into this conversation. Even firmly next year. I think he was there for a little bit as well too. So as it stands, Gobert seems like the guy who's going to go ahead and back into this, one more time. Again, with the fact that we do like to space things out a little bit and give everybody their turn. But Gobert, like I said, might be getting a second turn around here now as Utah Jazz is finishing off this NBA season extremely strong.
All right, Shaw, let's go ahead and shift our focus to the MIP, Most Improved Player. Who to you is going to walk away with that trophy?
So it's a runaway, for me, since the middle part of the season. Pascal Siakam from Toronto Raptors is going to be that guy. Shouts to D'Angelo Russell, Buddy Hield, even the Aaron Fox, although I don't like giving it to second year guys. I don't think the league likes doing that as well, too. Even Julius Randle had a great year in New Orleans, but I think Siakam, in some ways, kind of came out of nowhere and has now went from just being, all right, that's a nice contributor to, holy hell, that guy's a problem. And he really is. He's exactly that. So I think he's going to have a big playoff series for the Toronto Raptors, and I'm excited to see how everything works out for him this playoff run for Toronto, specifically alongside Kawhi. So Siakam's my guy. Montrezl Harrell also deserves some consideration as well too, but Siakam's the one.
I'm going to go against the grain with you on this one, Shaw. I do think that Siakam is deserving of it. I think he should win it, and I think it's going to raise the controversy and the concern yet again. But I think D'Angelo Russell is going to wind up getting this now that the Brooklyn Nets are officially in the playoffs. 21.2 points per game, 7 assists. He's shooting around 43, 45%, 36% from three. The last couple of games, the guy has been playing lights out basketball, game-winning shots. He's in the spotlight. And I feel like it would almost feel like injustice if there's no recognition, knowing that the Brooklyn Nets are one of those teams. And this could be the opportunity to present somebody deserving of that. If you're not going to give Spencer Dinwiddie the six Man of the Year award, you may wind up saying, okay, well, look at Siakam. We already know that Siakam is a good player. But then you also think about the fact that D'Angelo is coming off those, crazy injuries that he's had over the last couple of years. He never had an opportunity to get on the floor and really be the leader of the team that I think Kenny Atkinson wanted him to be. And here he's actually shown it that when healthy, he can actually lead a basketball team into the playoffs.
Yeah, the only rebut I have to it is just expectations. So I don't think anybody saw Siakam coming, whereas D'Angelo came in with a lot of fanfare, and there was some opportunity.
He came in with controversy. I don't know about fanfare. He came in with controversy. I don't know about fanfare.
But remember our guy Oliver Roney was like, hey, here's a guy who can average a double-double, and he's going to be Rookie of the Year and all these other things. That there was a lot of expectations coming in for D'Angelo. So in some ways, I feel like he's just living up to what he was supposed to do. And I'm not knocking it because, as they say, you still have to go out there and do it. And he has. He's proven himself this year. But nobody saw Siakam coming in this regard and jumping his points per game, almost 10 full points, from 7.3 to 16 now, and 7 rebounds a game, call it as well too, with 3 assists, is the way his ability to dribble. So both guys are very deserving. I just feel like Siakam has the edge in this award specifically because nobody thought he was going to be.
All right, you're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA as we break down the NBA regular season awards. 2 more awards left to go, Shaw, so let's go right into it. Rookie of the Year honors. We kind of discussed this maybe 3 weeks ago. We know that this is going to come down to Trae Young and Luka Doncic. Have you solidified your selections? Has it changed? Has it wavered any in since we last discussed this?
Well, if we were doing it by halves, it would. But totality of the season, no. Luka is that dude. He's gonna sweep the Rookie of the Month award, so to speak, especially in the Western Conference. He's gonna win this award. And Trae Young closed hard and closed strong, but he just didn't have enough of of a pedigree throughout the course of the regular season to get it done. And both teams, not stellar in terms of their record, but I just feel like Luka is a guy who's going to go ahead and take this award, with Trae Young getting all the second place votes. And I don't want to know who's even coming in third. I guess maybe DeAndre Ayton, but it's a 2-man race, but it really is a 1-man race because I think Luka won it probably back in December or January.
Yeah, I think it came out to be a lot closer than even I gave it credit for. And a lot of props to Trae Young. He's going to be an exciting basketball player. The Atlanta Hawks are very fortunate to have him. He's got some really nice pieces around him. Hopefully, he won't hit the sophomore jinx. Um, I don't see that with Luka Doncic. I think he's set up for success. The guy to me just shows a level of consistency that I think is very dangerous in this climate of the NBA. So, but with that being said, I think Luka Doncic to me, just his overall game from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, minus a few hiccups, he doesn't completely excite you, but he does things that will that excites the mind, about the possibilities of what he actually can do, what he can bring to the table. And he did that at various moments throughout the season. And I just think that at the end, it's just enough to get him through the finish line, even though Trae Young came on like gangbusters. I mean, the only way Trae Young winds up winning this is he would have had to have been doing what he's done over the last 2-3 weeks with the buzzer beaters and, the crazy passing and the shooting from half court, like almost every single night, and making these shots. He literally would have to be doing that like every single game towards the end of the year. But I think for all intents purposes, they're probably, they're going to probably shut the kid down, both of them down. And then when you just look at it, I think Luka, to me, this is just too much more consistency for him of his level of greatness for a rookie season. So kudos to, I'm not saying that he's won it, but I'm definitely going to give him my kudos, because no matter how you slice it, I think Luka is the Don. All right, Shaw. So now that we have pretty much gone through all of the awards, it's time for us to get right into the heart of it, man. The MVP. I think we can safely say it's a 2-man race. It's coming down. Yeah, it's coming down to the beard or to the freak. So choose which carnival you like to participate in. James Harden or Giannis Antetokounmpo? What are we talking about?
I can go with the crazy Carney beard, or I can go with, maybe the Greek sweets over there. I'm going to go with Giannis here, simply because, not to have a lot of banter on it, but because Harden has had a pretty good year. We've even talked about the fact that he's one of the league leaders in steals and deflections and all of those other things as well, too. I think Greek's ability to just simply lock people down, in a game earlier this week, he's blocking Joel Embiid while taking him to the rack on the other side of the basketball as well. I really do want to put some emphasis, in Greek season because of the defensive side of the basketball this year, and the fact that Milwaukee is the best team in the NBA. They clinched home court, all of that, and Harden's accolades come primarily from his offense. Honestly, game what he doesn't do offensively, he does defensively. And Harden's gap defensively compared to Giannis's is just too vast for me. So I recognize and respect everything the Beard has done this year, and any other year, he probably becomes back-to-back MVP. But
yeah, look, Shaw, excellent points, man. This is tough because I think by all accounts, the numbers are on James Harden's side. For him to win this is so backwards, man. This is why I can't stand, when we don't have clear-cut criteria about what is going to be used in order for us to determine someone who is going to be deserving of this type of an award. And, this may actually come down to us like you said, this is another example of why the NBA may need to move into, giving the MVP award for the respective conferences. I know that you want to give an overall MVP, but I also feel like an overall like the NBA Finals MVP, to me at times has more validity than the NBA's MVP. You remember more NBA Finals MVPs than you do remember people who won the MVPs during the regular season. But this again is another situation where both Giannis and both Harden are deserving to have done what they've been doing. And then I think it also diminishes the other participants. So with all that being said, I think that Giannis is going to win. I was more confident about Giannis winning because I was buying into the hype about the whole conspiracy theory aspect of this thing. But I'm a little downtrodden about it because I feel like we're going to take away from the astronomical numbers that James Harden put up this year in doing what he's done simply because we may be looking at it from a different perspective, emotionally giving this award to someone who is deserving of it, right? And who I think is reinvigorating the conversation of the big man dominating again and being worthy of being considered for an MVP.
It's always going to be a matter of preference, and while, like you said, the biggest point I think made here is that there's not a set out criteria for these awards, and without that, it's just always left up to interpretation. What I may like, what you may like versus what you may like. And while Harden has done an amazing job, I think separating himself from an offensive pack right now, if the trend continues as it has been, where it's the same thing, where we like to give people their turn, Harden had to wait his turn, and he's gotten it. And I feel like the league and voters are probably ready to move on from that now. I was like, all right, you did your thing. And just like how Russ is, like you said, is averaging the third straight triple-double, but who cares about that? Now we've seen that. It's old hat. So how can we keep this thing fresh? And I think that's what probably gives Giannis a leg up more than anything else. Stats be damned, if you will. I think it's just the voters' fatigue that they have a lot of times lends to kind of trying to bring in some new blood when it comes to these awards.
Whew. Man, some solid stuff right there, man. What can I tell you? This is going to be I'm actually looking forward to the NBA awards and who's going to wind up hosting the trophies. Because as much as we are speaking of guys being a lock to win it, I would be very curious to see where the vote counts, where the voting totals wind up, end up being. I'm not concerned about who's going to win it as much as I am going to be concerned about who wound up, runner up, who is an honorable mention in consideration. It would just be really interesting to me because I think when you lay the arguments out for all of the people that we've discussed, anyone could easily be knocked off. And then it just kind of begs the question, our journalistic instinct to say why, right? Or why not? So I think it'll be really interesting this year, Shaw, because there are so many deserving individuals and there's so many great things that came from, what we've seen so far in this regular season. And even though the season's not over yet, right? Like we may have the MVP of the NBA, but the MVP of who's going to wind up being the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference still has to be laid out, right? And the MVP of who's going to wind up getting their teams, whether you're the 7, the 6, the 5, or the 4 seed or the 3 seed in the Western Conference, that still has to come into play. So there's a lot of MVP conversations that's going to be taking place over the next couple of days before the playoffs begin.
Very well said. And I think our fans and listeners, we can't wait to hear back from you. Before we move on, I want to throw a bonus 2 questions out there that we put out there on Twitter. Most disappointing team and most surprising team. While this isn't necessarily an award, if you will, just I want to get your take on it. For me, I think the most disappointing team is probably the Boston Celtics, a team that was talking about winning 60 games, plus 60, might not even win 50. And the fact that they're in the middle of the seeds, so right there in the Eastern Conference, although they have secured home court advantage, I think they're the most disappointing team despite being in the playoffs. The most surprising team, I think, is very interesting because I look at Sacramento, I look at the Clippers, obviously I look at Orlando, I look at Brooklyn, and my mind is blown. So with that one, I think I lean towards Sacramento, only because I thought they'd really, truly be like a lottery team fighting for like maybe the 3rd or 4th pick, as opposed to just being on the fringes of it. although we've had a lot of conversation about Brooklyn here tonight too. So who's your most disappointing and most surprising teams in the NBA this year?
Oh man, I love it, man. Throwing it out there, man. We gotta interact with our peoples, man. So we definitely want to hear from you. So be sure to get at us at NBA Baseline. Once again, we appreciate you and yours for tuning in to us this week, man. A lot of good stuff. Be sure to check out the Baseline NBA podcast. We are gonna have special episodes taking place as we get you ready for the NBA playoff season, which will begin come Saturday. So that means that the Baseline will be dropping episodes prior to that. So you definitely want to check that out. Be on the lookout on our Twitter feeds as we start rolling out those episodes for you and yours. For the Baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys, each and every single one of you, and we'll catch up with you next time.